let me shift here, and I just want to talk a little bit about silence. Silence, my sisters and brothers, has many dimensions. There is a sacred silence, which is that silence out of which creative contemplation grows. It's a meditation on the word and the will of God. It's the silence out of which we meditate and get closer to God. It's the silence in which fervent prayer is born. There is a sacred silence. But then there's a seething silence that comes when you are quiet externally, but you've got a storm going on the inside. The late Dr. Howard Thurman called that a noisy quietness. But then finally, and here's the silence I want to get to, there is a sinful silence. And Adam's silence falls into this category because a sinful silence is a silence that comes over you when you ought to say something, but you don't say nothing at all. It is that silence that creeps in when you ought to speak up for God, but you sit there acting like you don't know what God said. My sisters and brothers, I fear that Adam was not only silent on that fateful day in the garden when a serpent showed up, but Adam has remained silent through the centuries. When Africans were captured and taken from their homeland, packed in the hulls of ships, sold on auction blocks, beat and killed and misused and kept in chattel slavery, Adam was silent. When Jews were persecuted, deported, and murdered by Nazis, Adam was silent. When Native Americans were slaughtered in the acts of genocide so their land could be taken from them, Adam was silent. When our ancestors were lynched and called boy and girl, even though they were full grown, when they were denied employment and equal access to resources, Adam was silent. And today, far too often, when our boys are shooting and killing each other on the streets, and our girls suffer from low self-esteem and give birth to children whose daddies won't stay around to take care of them, Adam is still silent. Sisters and brothers, there is a sinful silence among us when injustice is raging and we remain quiet. When people are aching, when people are hurting, when babies are crying and dying of hunger and not having enough love from insufficient care, and we remain silent, that is a sinful silence. When the church looks and sees what's going on in its communities, and not just in its communities, but what's going on right there in the household of faith, and we sit there and act like we don't know what's going on, that is a sinful silence. And let me suggest that there's a time when silence is sinful. And here in the text, we see a snake talking to Adam's wife. Adam remains silent. Adam should have said something. My sisters and brothers, the nation is waiting for somebody to say something. Go on, touch your neighbor and tell them you ought to say something. You see them boys on the corner, you ought to say something. You see what's happening with those sisters. I'm not talking about Pookie and Ray Ray and them. I'm talking about the saints' children. Y'all ain't gonna help me in here today. You ought to say something. The classroom is waiting for somebody to say something. Youth violence is waiting for somebody to say something. Every community, every city, every town, every home, every boy, every girl, every family is waiting for the church to break the silence. And if we don't break the silence, let me tell you what's going to happen. If we don't break the silence, we end up embracing the appeals of the serpent. What are the appeals of the serpent? Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. You've got a responsibility to go back to Lodabar. Your work's not done just because you made it to the palace. Bless the name of the Lord. But you've got a responsibility to help somebody else make it across. Thank you, Jesus. Don't pull up the ladder because you climbed to the top. Don't blow up the bridge because you made your way across. Thank you, Jesus. But reach your hand back down the ladder and pull somebody else up out of Lodabar. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Bless the name of the Lord. Somebody got to tell themselves, it's all right if you got it now, just hold it for me. I'll be there to get it after a while. Oh, bless the name of the Lord. Thank you, Jesus. You got to make up in your mind that what God has for me, it is for me. I might not have it right now. I may not get it next week. You might try to stop me from getting it. But if God said it's mine, I want you to know after a while, I'm going to get what belongs to me. Sometimes God got to strip what you got so you don't depend on yourself. You got to take away from you so you understand how to depend on else that God. Come on in here. Thank you, Jesus. Our young people are dying. Cracked out. Suicide. Homicide. They'll kill you at the drop of a dime. Our jails are full. Yet the crime still runs rampant. Sometimes God got to strip what you got so you don't depend on yourself. Thank you, Jesus. Hey, I don't have no $100,000 year cost. The $200,000, I got the $1 billion cost, baby. You better think, because the Bible says, as a man thinks. The reason we ain't because what we think we are. Thank you, Jesus.
90.7 WTCC. Good morning and welcome to the Spoken Word. I'm your host, Bishop Talbert Swan II. And as usual, we'll be telling it like it is through cultural idioms and nuances that shape the order, ethos, and chaos of the African American experience. Words have their own vitality. They shape their own consciousness and create their own context for interpreting social and spiritual reality. The spoken word contains the power to reshape the landscape of society. 5 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. And I want to thank my friend, Mr. Kenneth Barnett, for bringing us up into the 9 o'clock hour with the promise. You can hear the promise every Monday morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., bringing you the best in gospel music. Good way to start out your Monday morning. Great way to start out your week. And I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas holiday celebration and a wonderful New Year's celebration. But I hope you were being safe and responsible, because this virus, this COVID-19 is spreading like wildfire. This new variant, the Omicron variant, is spreading like wildfire. Not too many of us don't know anyone who has it or has had it or has died from it. And particularly for Black people, it's important we don't get caught up in the politicization of the virus. They've made it into a political football, a Democrat versus Republican thing, a conservative versus liberal thing, a black versus white thing. It's a life versus death thing. That's what it is, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends and enemies. It's about life and death. It ain't about your political party. It's not about your political leanings, your ideology, or your theological perspective. This is about life and death. And being Black in a pandemic is particularly difficult in these yet to be United States of America. That's what I'm going to be dealing with today. Being Black in a pandemic. You know, somebody's going to say, there you go again, Bishop. You're playing the race card. No. Let me tell you what I'm doing. I'm being a realist. Okay? I'm keeping it a buck. I'm keeping it 100. The bottom line is whether it's 1918 with the influenza pandemic, or whether it's 2020 and 2021 and now 2022 with the COVID-19 pandemic. America's response has been racialized, and how you receive care, if you receive proper care, has a lot to do with what you look like. And we're going to talk about that when we come back. 413-337-1867. 413-337-1867. Do me a favor. Jump in that chat there. Rep your city. Rep your town. Let me know where you're chiming in from. All right. Would love to know exactly where every listener is chiming in from. And then do me a favor. I need you to like. I need you to share. I need you to subscribe. I need you to do all of that stuff. Let somebody else know that the bishop is on the air right now and they need to get in on this conversation. Okay? They need to be a part of this conversation. It's going to go deep. Y'all put on some scuba gear. We get ready to get it in. Once again, 413-337-1867. 1867, 413-337-1867. Don't touch that dial. Don't you go nowhere. We're going to talk when we get back.
Positive attitude says everything about you. Attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. Every day you get up, you've been given a gift. That's why we call it a present. And it's up to you how you unwrap it. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery. Today is a gift. So don't let the pain of your past bleed into your present and poison your future. Stop replaying your movie. Why did this happen to me? When it's done with you, you're done with it. If it seems like you keep running into pigeons, it's an indication that you're flying too low. So set your sights a little higher. Eagles fly by themselves. If you can see the invisible, you can do the impossible. Allow the challenges to be a stepping stone to propel you into new possibilities. So be discontent with your past accomplishment. You're only as great as your last success. So maintain your hunger and your passion. Remember this, within every seed there is a tree, and every tree there is a forest. The way that you were born into, it's simply the environment to prepare you for your ultimate purpose. It was not a setback, it was a setup. Your purpose and potential is bigger than your past, pain, or trauma. Listen to your heart, you'll let you know you. All the time, maybe for you. Whatever you do, it's gonna come back to you. Successful people will do the things they hate to get the things they love. Much of life is about sacrifice. You got to give up something to get something. Success is not about what you've accomplished, it's what you have overcome. For it's a test that you pass in life which qualifies you for the next level. You have to be willing to face your challenges and overcome them. Most people ride 12,000 miles a year moving forward, but most accidents are caused when they move backwards. You gotta stay focused on what's ahead of you instead of what's behind you. It's your daily routine that determines your success or failure. Whatever you practice at is what you become good at. What's more important than being intelligent is having the right attitude. Respect costs you nothing, but it will cost you everything after having it. So don't be too smart for your good. Remember, hard head, soft behind. What's more important than your five senses is common sense. The heart of a fool is in his mouth, but the heart of a wise man is in his character. So don't sweat the small things. The answer for a short temper is a long walk. It's slow and deep. Quick to listen. Remember this. You gotta live long enough to everything. Your character is what matters most. Once you have been laid with the life it's hard for people to see you any other way. A good name is more than all the money in the world. Your life is broken up into three parts. First you learn, then you earn, and then you return. You gotta get back. I look in the mirror and I like what I see. A strong, beautiful black woman staring back at me. One who's seen a lot of pain and had her share of sorrow, but who never gave up hope for a brighter tomorrow. I've been lied to, cheated on, and stolen from and hit, but it just made me stronger and I refuse to quit. That's right. And though I've been tempted, I refuse to stoop to their level. I was above that nonsense and made a liar of the devil. All right. The devil who said I wasn't good enough, cute enough, or worthy of love, I kicked his butt with divine power from above. Power that says I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me and brought me out of darkness so that I could see that I'm smart, I'm beautiful, I'm a child of the King. Abundant love for me, He came to bring. Oh yes, when I look in the mirror, I love what I see. That strong, beautiful black woman, that woman is me.
Anybody else out there like what they see? When you look in the mirror, you ought to like what you see. Good morning. 413-337-1867. Chi-Town in the hizzy. Maryland is up in here. The field, Springfield, Massachusetts is in here. New York is in here. Virginia is up in here. Cleveland, Ohio is in the building. Rep your city, rep your town. Let me know where you're chiming in from. Good morning, Jesse Preacher Man Burgess. Good morning, Ayanna Crawford. Stephanie Johnson. Michael Moore, I see you, brother. I see you. I don't want to get to call a name because I can't call all of y'all. I'll leave somebody out. So do me a favor. When I count to three, I want everybody out there listening to me to call your name. 1, 2, 3. Bam. Now all of the important people have been called. 413-337-1867 is the number here. The whole world has been in a pandemic, but there's nothing quite like being black in America in a pandemic. And, I was leaning toward talking about this subject already since last week. When Omicron, the reports about Omicron, began to circulate about how 59% of all of the new cases of the Omicron variant. And, I had studied the 1918 pandemic at the beginning of this just to see how they responded to it. My grandmother was orphaned in that pandemic. It had a lot to do with shaping my family. It put her in a household of members of her church to take care of her when she was just a teenager, and she ended up marrying a member of that household. And out of that union came 11 additional children, one of them being my father. So my family was literally shaped by the 1918 pandemic. So it was of great interest to me, both from a contemporary perspective to juxtapose it against the backdrop of what we're going through now, but also from a historical perspective. And then particularly looking at it from the vantage point of how Black folks fared in a pandemic in 1918. And I want to tell you, it's not a whole lot of difference. A century later, a full century later, I hate to report to you that there's not a whole lot of difference in how Black people were treated during the 1918 pandemic and how they've been treated during this pandemic. And what really pushed me over the edge to definitely talk about this today, and incidentally coming up at 9:30 is Senator Eric Lesser with our State House update. And then at 10 o'clock, we'll transfer over to Justice and Flow. But what really pushed me to really talk about this is I got a text message on Sunday morning from a dear friend who was telling me about their friend who had been to the emergency room here in my city 3 different times. And they basically sent the friend home, no big deal. But the person had COVID. And the next text said, my friend was finally admitted and is in a coma on a ventilator. Then the next text I got, the same Sunday morning, my friend died. And she attributed that to the lack of attention and care from the medical community right here in my city. Right here in my city. And so here was a real live example of exactly what I was preparing to talk about today. A real live example in living color in my city, in one of the premier medical communities, major employers here in my city. And let me just tell you this, brothers and sisters, this is real. In an American pandemic or an American epidemic, race is a pre-existing condition. And I know we talk about all of the comorbidities that go along with exacerbating COVID, or COVID exacerbating these pre-existing conditions that put you more at risk. And we talk about diabetes and hypertension and heart disease and obesity and any number of comorbidities. But race is a pre-existing condition. Whether it was the influenza pandemic of 1918 or the COVID-19 pandemic now over a century later, race and ethnicity have been, and they continue to be, enormous factors in determining whether people will receive medical attention when they become ill and the sort of attention they will receive. That was borne out in the information that I got on yesterday, that this dear soul, because of their race, did not receive the proper medical attention, and they are no longer here because of it. In the 1918 influenza pandemic, there was S.C. Jenkins wrote something called the 1919 Influenza Blues, and it documented the toll the flu took on the country, noting that the viruses don't discriminate when it comes to their victims. And she sang, people died everywhere. Death went creeping through the air, and the groans of the rich sure were sad. But it was God's own mighty plan. He's judging this old land. North and south, east and west can be seen. He killed rich and poor. He's going to kill some more. Now, according to the CDC, the 1918 flu infected 500 million people worldwide and resulted in 50 million deaths around the globe, 675,000 which were American. And incidentally, we've already passed that number in terms of the number who died in America. We haven't passed the global number of 50 million, but the 675,000 that died in America, we've passed that with COVID. We're nearly at 800,000 in America. But while viruses don't discriminate, people do. So she was right. Viruses don't discriminate. Doesn't matter whose body they get into. But people do. And in cities across the nation, Black people were struck by the flu, by the influenza virus, had to fend for themselves. They got substandard care in segregated hospitals. They were relegated to close quarters so they couldn't socially distance. They were put in basements. They were told they could only go to Black-only hospitals. And then even in death, you study this 1918 pandemic, even in death, Black bodies were neglected by white public infrastructure. In Baltimore that year, white sanitation department employees refused to dig graves for Black flu victims after the city's only Black cemetery, Mount Auburn, could not accommodate any more graves. So they was basically saying, y'all on your own, y'all figure out where you're going to bury your loved ones. And the mayor of that city had to appeal to the War Department, which is now the Department of Defense, about this problem. I mean, it was crazy. And, you know, maybe we don't see it quite along those terms, but there are some disparities that exist now with this COVID-19 that are very troublesome, extremely troublesome. And you just have to open your eyes and see. Open your eyes and see. And the politicization of this thing being Democrat versus Republican and all of that only further exacerbates the racial divide, because we understand most Black people in this nation lean to be Democrats. And so when the virus is put in terms of politics, Democrats versus Republicans, of course, most Black people are going to be on one side of the argument. So it becomes a Black versus white thing. When at the beginning of the program, I said it was a life versus death thing. This is not about Democrat versus Republican. This is not about conservative versus liberal. This is not about, you know, your political party. This is about whether you live or whether you die. That's the reality of it. 413-337-1867. We'll talk more about this. We're going to bring on our monthly guest, Senator Eric Lesser, who is coming with our State House update. On the other side of that, we're going to bring in some folks from the Twitter space. We're going to take your telephone calls, and we're going to go more into this conversation about this pandemic. You know, most folks thought we were going to be in this for a couple of months. When you study the 1918 pandemic, you find out they really didn't start coming out of it until 1921. So you're talking about 18, 19, 20, and part of 21. It affected them in 4 different years. So we need to buckle our seatbelts for the long haul. You know, we had 20, we had 21. Now we're in 22. we still may not be out of this before this year is over. This is part of history now, and we're smack dab in the middle of it. Senator,
Good morning, Bishop. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. How you feeling?
Good. Can you hear me okay? Because last time I was on, I got some, feedback from some people that said that I'd been echo. So I just want to make sure I changed my setup, but I've got earphones in. So can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, sir.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. Coming in. Well, Happy New Year. New Year, same issues.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's a new year, turning of the day, turning of the page, but we're still dealing with many of the same issues. Absolutely.
Yeah, so hope you had a good New Year's Eve with your family and a good Christmas and everything. So just want to give wishes to everyone, but we've got a lot on our plate. Omicron, obviously, front and center in the motion right now.
Yeah. So what is the state? What are their plans in tackling this Omicron?
Yeah.
And then let me ask this question. There's such a disparity in terms of the way each city and town is dealing with mask mandates and those types of things. And there's no consistency. What can we do about that? Is the state going to step in and deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So Springfield is putting, for example, an indoor mask mandate back on. I believe it takes effect today. Several of our neighboring communities have done that, but there is not a statewide mask mandate in Massachusetts right now. And you're right, creating a lot of inconsistency in terms of where you go, what business you're in, where what town or city you're in, what the rules are. I think we've got to have a conversation at this point about a statewide mask requirement. Omicron is spreading very, very fast. We does look like it's less severe if you're vaccinated than previous variants have been, but the rate of spread, Bishop Bay State Health, for example, these numbers over the weekend, they have, I believe, 220 patients.
Real quick, they say you do have an echo. I don't know.
Let me try one other thing here. I'm sorry about that. Is this better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So, I think we've just got to acknowledge and reckon with the point that, like you were just saying, just before I came on, COVID is not over. We have a lot more tools, certainly, than we did in 2020. We do have vaccines. Everybody over the age of 5 can get vaccinated at this point. We have masks. We know a lot more about the virus, but it is not over. So we need to stay vigilant. So I do think a statewide mask requirement has got to be back on the table. The governor's been asked about that repeatedly and has frankly been somewhat dismissive about it. But I do think you're pointing out something important, which is, the virus doesn't know if you're in Springfield or West Springfield or in, Agawam or Northampton or wherever. And so the idea that the masks would be dependent on what town or city you live in doesn't make a whole lot of sense from a medical point of view.
Now, there are a lot of people who are talking about the state's vaccination mandate. And I know that there's some pending lawsuits around that. And I even know of some people who have quit their jobs, who were long time state employees. I'm talking about people who've been working for the state 25 plus years, who decided to walk away, rather than get vaccinated. What's been the feedback you've gotten around that?
Overwhelmingly, I've gotten positive feedback about the state mandate. There have certainly been a lot of people that have written to me or stopped me or reached out to me with complaints about it or feeling like it was unfair. But I think the thing to remember is that of the more than 40,000 state employees that were subject to the mandate, the overwhelming majority complied with it. I do think that there needs to be obviously a narrowly tailored religious exemption that needs to be appropriately managed and engaged with. And we've got to be sensitive to the fact that there is still vaccine hesitancy. We need to do more around education, around outreach. But I do feel strongly that vaccines are going to be the most important way we get out of the pandemic, and we've got to, really do everything we can to encourage them, and tying them, especially for highly sensitive, public-facing employment positions like working in hospitals or police who encounter the public on a regular basis, or paramedics and people like that. Anybody working sort of in a public-facing role, it's especially important.
Now, I understand that the state rejected a number of folks who applied for a waiver based on religious exemption.
Right. Yeah, I don't know the specifics of those cases. It's handled by the individual human resources or human relations departments in each relevant department. I do know we've got one of the strictest in the country for sure for our state employees. So, without knowing the specifics of what went back or forth there, and I don't want to comment on a specific case, but I do think for the most part, almost everyone really should be getting vaccinated. It's really important, and it's the most important tool we've got to get all of this under control.
What about, I know you said you thought that we should be moving toward having a statewide mask mandate. In other cities or towns, say for instance New York City, you can't go into a restaurant and eat without showing proof of vaccination.
Right.
Do you see Massachusetts going in that direction at any point?
Well, the hope is that the spread can get under control with the other tools we have, right? Which is with the vaccination programs we've got, and the masking programs, and the testing and quarantining. Boston, in addition to New York City, has now moved to a similar kind of vaccine passport program that Mayor Michelle Wu announced about 2 weeks ago, I believe. So it's something we got to keep on the table, because we need every tool available to keep the spread under control. But my hope is, I think everybody's hope is that if we do what we need to do right now, in terms of keeping masks on when in indoor settings, in terms of getting vaccinated, getting booster shots, and trying our best to be careful, not shutting down. We're in a different place than we were in 2020. That is not appropriate at this point, given the tools we've got 2 years into this. But we've just got to stay vigilant. So, I think I think we don't know yet. I think we just got to keep an eye on it.
There's some that would beg to differ in terms of whether or not shutting down is appropriate, in terms of the fact that we're in a new wave with this Omicron variant, and with schools, being open, etc. And I understand, the tools that are out there, but with the spread, there's some who are thinking along the lines that there should probably be another shutdown to stop the spread, but we're not going to go that route.
Well, it's not in my power to do that. I mean, that's obviously through the executive branch. But what I would say is we've got to do everything possible to avoid that. I mean, Bishop, you and I were doing the call-ins all through that period. We know the pain that caused, the dislocation it caused for people. So obviously, we've got to keep every tool there. But our hope is, is that we can do everything we can right now through the masking, through the vaccinations, the boosters, the testing, to avoid that result. But again, obviously nothing can be ruled out one way or the other. We've got to see where the numbers go.
Gotcha.
I mean, the thing I would also, just to add, which is I think relevant and important, is there's good insight now also into both the rates of hospitalization and the types of people that are being hospitalized. At Bay State, about 3/4 of the hospitalized patients are people who have been not vaccinated at all. They haven't gotten a single shot. And for the minority of people who did get vaccinated but ended up in the hospital, they either have have quite a lot of other underlying health issues and or are in the hospital with much less severe illness. So we've really just got to continue to push vaccination, do everything we can to get people vaccinated. And that includes, by the way, getting into communities, working with community leaders, continuing the education campaigns. I do think the state took its focus off that, especially over the summer, and we've got to really make sure that we redouble that.
Gotcha. All right. Do me a favor, Senator. Give folks your number because maybe some may want to call and follow up with you. I see some folks in the comment section. So if you want to follow up with Senator Lesser, take down his information.
So the local office number, 413-526-6501. Again, 413-526-6501. And my email is eric.lesser@masenate.gov. You can also find me on Facebook, Eric Lesser MA, Twitter @Eric Lesser, and Instagram, Eric Lesser MA. So old-fashioned social media, telephone, or just come see me. I'm actually on my way to Chicopee right now for the Mayor View and the City Council's inauguration. So we've got a lot happening in the new year.
Yes, sir. All right, Senator. Always a pleasure. We'll see you.
Thanks, Bishop.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
413-337-1867. That was Senator Eric Lesser with our State House update. What's happening in the Commonwealth. I see some of you all have some very strong opinions on that little conversation. But you can definitely contact the senator. Good morning. Alabama is up in the house. Rep your city, rep your town. Definitely want to know where you're chiming in from. 413-337-1867 is the number here if you want to get in on the conversation. If you're in the Twitter space and you want to chime in, put in that request and we'll get you up in the Twitter space so you can say your piece in all of this. Here's the historical perspective that connects the past to the current time that we're in. The reality is this, that the effects of America's doctrine, its previous doctrine, it was a written doctrine and a practice doctrine. Now it's just a practice doctrine, but not on the books anymore. But the doctrine of separate and unequal permeated everything during the 1918 pandemic. It not only shaped who received treatment and where they received treatment, but also which people were deemed qualified to provide medical care. It was W.E.B. Du Bois who really motivated Black people to enlist and join the Army because he thought that it would prove how loyal Black folks were to America. And yet that never really panned out for us because, you know, Black folks went and fought in every war and still were treated like second-class citizens. And in America, people will always tell you that this is a nation that was founded on biblical principles. It is a Judeo-Christian nation. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. America was built on racism, white supremacy. It was built on the genocide of indigenous people, the theft of land, the enslavement of Africans, the brutal dehumanization of Black people. America was built on the blood, sweat, and tears of Black people and other non-white folks. And That's how America was built. And if you talk to public health historians today, they will tell you that prejudice and systemic racism in the American healthcare system is once again at the forefront with the emergence of COVID-19. And this time, it's still Black folks that are the targets of these disparities. There were some Asian people that were scapegoated from the Trump administration when he started labeling it the Chinese virus and all of those types of things. And then in this so-called Christian nation, they forget what it means to be, well, I won't say they forget what it means to be Christian, because as my friend Freddie Haynes says, he says white Christians have always been too busy being white and never got around to being Christian. Because if you were truly Christian, you would know Jesus said, the first and great commandment is thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as yourself. And then he says, upon these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So race prejudice runs directly counter to the great Christian commandment. You can't be a Christian and be racist at the same time. You know, never mind what the white man may think of it. We see clearly what God thinks of it. It's the estimate that he puts upon it that is to determine its character. And wanting equality and equity and justice is not just for the sake of Black people and other non-white people, but also for the sake of white folks themselves, because they are affected by their great folly of racial prejudice, of assuming that white skin entitles one to better treatment than someone with melanin in their skin, which both the 1918 pandemic and this pandemic have strikingly taught. And we're seeing it, and I know there are some of you out there who have a testimony about it. COVID-19 has not only brought interpersonal racism to the forefront, but it's heightened the degree to which structural racism affects treatment and care in the medical community. There have been those who are advocates in the community that have pleaded with officials to release inmates when COVID-19 first started spreading in the close quarters of Rikers Island and other penal facilities. Similar situations that existed in U.S. Customs Enforcement detention facilities. They pleaded with them to release folks because both of these places disproportionately housed Black people and other non-white people. And they didn't care. They didn't care. It's like with the 1918 flu pandemic, the response or the lack thereof to COVID-19 have become tied up with so-called patriotism, xenophobia, in ways that exacerbate the spread of the disease. And it's what's disheartening about all of this. You know, there's an old saying that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Man, how am I sitting here over a century later after the 1918 pandemic? It was my great grandmother died because of the influenza virus. And my grandmother, as a teenager, was orphaned. How am I sitting here over 100 years after that, talking about the disparate way in which Black people are treated by the medical facility in this COVID-19 pandemic? A century later, and we're still dealing with the same disparities that they did during a time of segregation and of blatant, open, in your face white supremacy and bigotry? How is that possible? Yet they want to convince us that racism doesn't exist anymore. They want to convince us that it's a figment of our imagination, that we're just exaggerating. You know, we're just complaining unnecessarily. Yet, when the history books are written, they will talk about this pandemic in much the same way we talked about the 1918 pandemic, in terms of how we were dealt with by this American system. It is more than just comorbidities that exist in the African American community. Yes, that is definitely a factor, but it's more than that. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
My question is, do you think this pandemic is for population elimination?
Well, I kind of reserve, my thoughts on the theories that people would call conspiracy theories, just to see how things play out and what evidence is brought up. I'm not one who immediately dismisses those types of theories, because I know the history of America. But I don't want to be premature in putting that out there in the space without some hard evidence that points towards that. But it would not be surprising. With Tuskegee and all of the other dastardly things that have been done through the years, I wouldn't be surprised. But right now, I don't have any hard evidence that says that that's the case.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I want to speak on is, as I always say, health is wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't we, as Black folks, take a stronger role in eating right, building our immune system up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that'd be a good? Because if you think about the pandemic, it hit our areas, like the urban areas, the tenements, the high rises, the prisons.
Close in quarters where people can't socially distance, where the spread can go faster. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we should teach our kids not just our people, everybody, but it affects us more in terms of the disparity in health issues that concerns us as a race.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you for your call. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big advocate for us taking control of our own health and trying to eat healthier and exercise. And because the reality is this: remove COVID-19 from the scene. And I said this in a sermon a couple of weeks back. If we got rid of COVID-19, black folks are still at the top of the list in terms of diabetes and heart disease and um, any number of comorbidities and negative health um, disparities that exist. I mean, that's the reality. So we definitely have to deal with that. Let me bring Sonny into the Twitter space before I transition out of here. Sonny, you're up.
Yo, good morning. Good morning.
Good
Good morning,
morning.
Bishop. Good morning to everybody in the space. I definitely would like to reiterate on a few things that the last caller was saying. Um, we know as foundational Black Americans, right? We know that it's been it's like a 450, 500 years of medical experimentation, medical apartheid. So we have a little bit of a lead, way more than a leeway to be more than skeptical, right, of what's going on. I know my grandfather, who's still alive right now, who fought in the Vietnam War, who's a foundational Black American, right? I think like 3-4 years ago, he was at the VA and they just now said he had Agent Orange, but he always had, skin welts and things, all over, blisters all over his skin. I also find it a little bit funny that, people like, our health leaders in our community, like, the Rizza Islams and the people who are talking about natural holistic health, they're being shadow banned. I don't recall anybody being shadow banned for lying. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Listen.
It's crazy. You know what I mean? So when people are because I'm seeing more towards a pushback towards Black people of how come you not getting the vaccine and how come you skeptical? You just roll up your sleeve and go get the shot. And people not really connecting the dots of why we feel this way. You know what I mean? So
there's absolutely a history that exists, a reason to be skeptical, and you're right. They definitely shadow ban, block Black voices of dissent. I've been a victim of that many times over, because they want to silence anybody who challenges our people to think beyond the scope of the norm. And unfortunately, they own the methods by which we get our message out. And that's why we've got to create our own spaces. That's why it was so revolutionary when W.E.B. Du Bois and those had the Crisis magazine, when Marcus Garvey had his own method of communication, when the Nation of Islam came up with the final call and all of that, because we had to have a way of getting our message to our people. And so, we've got to continue to do that, but definitely appreciate your perspective, brother. 413-337-1867. When we come back, we're going to be in Justice and Flow. So I've got to transition out of the spoken word on WTCC. All of you all who are listening, over our 4,000 watts in the Pioneer Valley, throughout Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, and wherever you are listening, jump on social media. Join me on Twitter. Join me on YouTube. Join me on Facebook or wherever, and we can continue our conversation as we transition into the Justice and Flow Hour. Remember to follow me on social media. Those of you calling in, we'll get right back to you after we get done with the break. Follow me on social media, and if you're looking for a place to worship, we're We're streaming live right now. We only have essential staff in our space, but join us at 11 a.m. on Sunday. I got to go from this space and transition into another. So until the next time I talk to you and you talk to me, always remember God loves you, and so do I. What's happening?
Not much. How you doing? Good
Chilling like,
morning, everybody.
huh?
I said good morning, everybody.
All right, all right. Welcomes, y'all, to the Justice and Flow after show in the space. Those of you in the Twitter space, hit us up with a request if you want to get on. Once again, the number is still the same: 413-337-1867. We get it up there. There it is. So what's on tap for today?
Okay, well, I have a couple of announcements to make, but let me first, make my official greeting and again say good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of Justice and Flow 2022. It's been deemed by one of our listeners, one of our friends or family members, Mother Green, as the year of pursuit or to pursue. And so I've been saying that pursue is about more than just pursuing your dreams. I think that's fine, or pursuing a better job, or pursuing more money, or as the young people say, pursuing your bag, whatever the case may be. But I like to say, oh, good morning, Mother Green. I'm talking about you. But I would like to say it's the year to pursue more love and to live a life without regrets. So, do whatever you need to do to make things right in your relationships and your important, significant relationships. So, if you need to forgive, if you need to humble yourself, or if you need to repent, if you need to apologize, do whatever you need to do so you will live a life with no regrets. And if we lose somebody, the time that we spent with them or we had with them, we will have no regret. We will have no regret because we loved them while they were here. We appreciated them while they were here. We recognized them while they were here. We acknowledged them while they were here. So give each other your flowers now. Give each other your flowers now. We made it into 2022, and this is not no longer a season of hoarding. This is a time for us to love on each other, appreciate each other, for us to come together so that we can pursue a better life for each other and increase a quality of life for each other. So amen. And so I wanted to say that. And in answering your question, Bishop, I initially had scheduled Zeta Govan to be with us this morning. As everybody knows, she's a newly elected Ward 8 City Council woman. And she's going to be joining us at least once a month, just like Senator Lesser does on the spoken word. Zeta's going to be joining us once a month. I was really excited about talking to Zeta today because Zeta was also one of the plaintiffs that sued the city for the residency requirement. So I wanted to talk to her.
Being sworn in today?
They've been sworn in today, so that's the reason why we have to postpone it until next week. So yeah, so I was about to say that, but you you jumped in there, you interjected. So, but anyway, yeah, so they're being sworn in today, so that's the reason why she can't join us today, but she's gonna join us on next week, and we're gonna be having a conversation with Zeta. But also, one of the segments that I've added to Justice and Flow for this year, 2022, is what I'm calling Black Mental Health Mondays. Black Mental Health Mondays. So we're going to be talking about mental health later on today in the show. But again, I have a couple of other announcements. Hey, Whitney. Hey, Joy. Hey, everybody. Listen, let me stop looking at that so I can make these announcements. But good morning, everybody. Let me make these announcements. I wanted to shout out, this is really important, everybody. This is really important. Our uncle, the he's pretty much the patriarch for us. He certainly is the pioneer for us, for Bishop and I, and our family. Bishop Talbert W. Swan, the first, turned 94 on yesterday. So we want to make sure that we shout out our Uncle Talbert Swan the first, and tell him happy birthday. We love you. I call him old man, and he called me big girl sometimes. He called me big girl sometimes. But anyway, it's a little thing that we have between each other. We love you. We are praying for you. And we're asking for the whole community, everybody, to pray for our uncle. He had surgery on last week. He's still in hospital recovering from surgery. And to please, shout him out. And if you want to send other well wishes or whatever, just get in touch with me, and I will certainly help you make that happen. But anyway, he is a great man of God. He has certainly been an example for us. He's been an upstanding man. And when I think of integrity, when I think of a man of his word, like this man never said anything that he was going to do that he did not do. He is a real man of his word. He's a real man of integrity. He is really an example of holiness. He's really an example of a churchman, and we really appreciate him, and we just love you so much, and we just thank God for your 94 years here on earth with us. Bishop, did you want to say anything?
Well, Uncle T has been, well, an inspiration my entire life. He's probably the greatest man that I know. Um, and I'm just proud to carry his name and to walk in his footsteps and carry his legacy. Um, there have been in the 42 years, this will be 42 years in September, history of the Spring of Hope Church. There's been two pastors, him and me. So I'm carrying out his legacy in more ways than one, by carrying his name, by pastoring his church, um, by being in leadership in our national denomination. Um, Being the president of the NAACP is something he was once upon a time as well. And so, happy birthday to Uncle Talbert, 94 years. I used to always tease him when we traveled together. I'd always do the old man jokes and stuff. And he said, my boy, you're trying to get to where I am. And
That's right.
that the only way not to is to die young. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, well, I'd rather get to where you are. And this is, of course, back when he was only in his 60s and 70s. So
He
um,
he's
I'm
a
much I'm much older now than I was then, and I've learned a whole lot about life through his example, and so we love him dearly.
you want to tell the people how you ended up with your uncle's name instead of your father's name?
Well, my dad um, had such a high esteem for his big brother, um, who had uh, no son, had no biological children of his own. And so after my sister Rhonda was born, I was the second child, but the oldest boy. And to honor his big brother, he named me for him
Mm-hmm,
instead of giving me his own name.
mm-hmm,
And so he waited until um, his next son was born, who's the son that's a year younger than I am, and he got the name Fred Allen Swan,
mm-hmm,
and I got the name Talbert Wesley. So
mm-hmm.
that's how I wound up with my uncle's name. And the
And you
second,
don't explain it anymore to people because people assume that Uncle Talbot is your father. So
yeah, I don't.
we don't
Well,
we don't even try to explain anymore that that's our uncle. Now,
every circle I've been in, particularly in the church circles in our national denomination, even to this day, even after all these years of saying, my uncle used to always correct people. Oh, your son, your son, your son. That's my nephew. That's my nephew. And they,
mhm,
your dad, your dad, your dad. That's my uncle. That's my uncle. And we both stopped. We both just, you know what?
yeah,
Okay, how's your dad? He's doing
right.
fine. You know, how's your son? He's doing fine. So we don't correct people anymore.
It only happened one time. Well, maybe it happened a couple of times. But Uncle Talbot is well known, and of course, he's had a long life. And he's still here with us, thank God. So he turned 94 on yesterday. But it's been a couple of times. I've gone into new circles and I've been introduced, and they would hear the name Swan, and they would say, "You're married to Bishop Swan?" And I didn't realize, it sometimes it would take a minute. But this was before you were a bishop. This was before you were a bishop. But it happens now probably more frequently because you're both the bishop. But anyway, but Uncle Talbert was made a bishop earlier on, in the Church of God in Christ International, correct? So,
Yeah.
but anyway, people thought that I was his wife, and they was like, "Wow, he married a really, like he got a really young wife." And I was like, "Oh, that's my uncle." No, that's my uncle. No, I'm not married to that Bishop Swan, or that Elder Swan, or that Pastor Swan. It's been a trip. It's been an amazing ride, though. Uncle Talbert has an outstanding reputation as a man of God, and I just wanted to, take a minute to certainly shout him out. And again, in this year of pursuing, definitely acknowledge those that we admire and love, and not wait. I put up a post the other day, babe. I basically was saying and thinking of the new year and my aspirations of the new year, and then trying to encourage people to kind of have a certain mindset in the new year. I basically said, treat every day or approach every day like it's your birthday, you know, like it's your birthday, and don't wait for special holidays, birthdays, anniversaries to let somebody know that you love or admire, that you do love them and admire them. I'm telling you, sometimes just a kind word or just a check-up phone call, it goes a long way, especially when it's unexpected, or when you just send somebody a text message and you just tell them, listen, I was thinking about you today, or I prayed for you today. I'm checking in on you. Do you need anything? How are you feeling? What's going on? Da da da. Can I help? Or whatever. Those little messages go a long way. And we could talk about that a little bit more with it being Mental Health Mondays, and how, those approaches can certainly help us. Wanted to make a couple of other announcements, babe, before we go further into today's program. But I also wanted to, I don't know if I did this officially. I think I might have been rushing on one of the shows before um, today, but I wanted to make sure that I slowed down a little bit, to definitely a shout out another member of our family, which that's Uncle Ben Swan, telling him congratulations on the renaming of the Homer Street School to the Benjamin Swan Elementary School. So I wanted to certainly say to the school committee members, thank you for the acknowledgement and recognition of Ben Swan. He's a hero, and an icon, a legend, even a living legend. So thank you for seeing all that he is, certainly to the local community and abroad, and all of his accomplishments. Just kind of summed up into one. By certainly renaming the Homer Street School. And so hopefully we can also one day rename the street, after Uncle Ben as well. But anyway, so did you want to say anything on that, or any comments on that as
Well,
well?
again, another of my uncles who definitely had a strong influence in my life. Um, I remember as a kid um, when we would go to Amherst to my dad's house. Uncle Ben lived right near him, and my cousin Robbie and I, we would sneak into Uncle Ben's house uh, through the back door. He'd be gone, and we just sit in his house, um, eat whatever food he had prepared. He was the grill master and all that, and that's when I developed a love for. I've always had an eclectic kind of um, admiration for different kinds of music, but he's a jazz aficionado.
Yes, he is.
That's the only thing I found in there. Was so that's why I'd listen to the John Coltrane's and the Miles Davises and all of that, because that was all in Uncle Ben's repertoire, and of course he was the consummate community activist, um, having served as both as president of the NAACP, having served in core. You hear a lot of people talk about marched with King, and
Uh-huh.
some of them be lying and stuff. but he for real was in the
Yeah,
civil rights.
he was in Selma. He was in Selma.
And of course, the iconic photo of him being arrested on the steps of
Mhm,
Springfield City Hall when
mhm.
former Mayor Charles Ryan called the National Guard as they were protesting the Octagon Lounge incident here in the year that I was born in '65, and so
That's
I
Whitney's birthday twin.
I grew up, seeing this, Black Power figure live and in color. This daishiki wearing afro, having uh,
Uh-huh.
real life figure
Uh-huh.
who was right there in our family, and he inspired me a lot. I have so many influences, of course, my mom and others, but a lot of my activism, I patterned after my uncle Ben, who then went on to become a long-term state legislator. And it's not just the work he's done here in the region; he's done work nationally and internationally. I mean, in Africa and other places as well. And so this is a fitting honor for a man who's worthy of that honor. So
Yeah.
congratulations out to Uncle Ben, and who's also been on the WTCC radio program. I've been on it for 22 years now. He's been on it over 30 years with the Black Love Experience. So he's an icon in our community, and he's deserving of this honor.
Yeah, so again, congratulations to our Uncle Ben. We love you. And we appreciate you and keep inspiring us to do better and to do greater things. So on to some sad news again before we get into our topic for the day, and I do have time. Um just wanted to kind of bring to everybody's attention, some who may not know, there has been a great number of losses this past week, or yeah, I should say over the holiday break. And some of which you was talking about, I think, on your show a little bit earlier. You started to talk about COVID 19. Well, just the virus, because there's many variants at this point. But anyway, the virus and what the virus is doing in our community. Not to say that all of the losses are associated with the virus or affiliated with the virus, but we've had a lot of losses, two in particular, that are close and well near and dear to the NAACP and to us as community members or active community members is Mr. Tony Malone. They call him Mr. Family Center of the Boys and Girls Club in Springfield. We lost that brother on this week, and we also lost one of the queen mothers of the NAACP, Miss Sophie Jeffries. And so we are certainly mourning their losses and the losses of so many others, unfortunately, that we've lost. I heard of a young lady on yesterday that that was close to some of the people that we're close to. I mean, just tragedy happening all around us. So again, Bishop, we just want to encourage everybody to certainly support each other, love on each other, be there for each other. But also, let's do whatever we can to promote safety, to promote health, and promote wellness during these trying and difficult times. Did you want to say anything about Mr. Malone or Miss Jeffries? Hey?
Yeah, I grew up with Tony. I used to go to the Boys and Girls Club Family Center. Now was just the Springfield Girls Club back then. Um, with my cousin, my aunt Lola, and my cousins Robbie and David and Joyce and Gail lived right there in Amore Village, and so whenever we went over there, we'd wind up going to the club, and they had everything in there, of course, boxing, basketball, you name it, they had it. Tony started working there literally like as a teenager. You know, for the last 40 years, he's been a part of the club. So he really spent his life, working with our children, mentoring them,
Yeah,
uh,
we.
being a part of that whole family, and he's literally raised generations of kids,
Mhm.
through the club, and he's also a cousin of my brother-in-law, Mike Malone, and so we grew up
I was
around
just
20.
with him the other week
Yeah,
celebrating Mike and Frida.
yeah, and so it's a great loss to our community, and he's one of those unsung heroes. We
Yeah,
always think about people who are in the spotlight, but it's people who work behind the scenes who don't get much acclaim and all of that, who really help this community uh, be a
push this
better
community
place.
forward, right? Hmm.
And so it's a great loss, and the loss of Mike Malone. So our condolences go out to the Malone family and to the Boys and Girls Club family. I know that's a great loss for them as well. And of course, Sophie Jeffrey. Um, I first met Sophie back when my daughter Whitney was in preschool, and I'll date myself. Whitney is 36 years old now, um, and so it's been over 30 years. When I first encountered Miss Jeffrey when she was at early childhood, where she eventually retired from early childhood, and then she was always a part of something in our community, whether it was Springfield Neighborhood Housing or the MLK Center or the Democratic Committee, the NAACP, you name it. Sophie was right there behind the scenes. And the interesting thing is, when I first ran for the NAACP, 25 years ago, of course, Sophie was there then. Sophie was part of a group of individuals who kind of saw me as a little too radical, for this traditional civil rights organization. And they basically planned behind the scenes and coalesced around recruiting someone else to run so that they keep me out of it. And they successfully did that by 22 votes. Um, and I remained part of the branch as the chair of the legal redress committee, etc. And we developed an understanding and a relationship, and it was ironic that 15 years later, after the branch had basically become defunct, um, and was now revitalized and having a special election, that I got a call from Sophie Jeffrey, um, now encouraging me and pushing me to please run for president of the branch. And I said, "My, how times have changed." Um, and I did run and win, and for the last um, 10 plus years now, 11 years that I've been president, she's been one of my most ardent supporters, in terms of the work of the branch. And I think Sophie and I must talk 2 or 3 times a week, about things concerning the city and the branch, etc. She was our treasurer, a member of our executive committee. There are a number of things I'm mulling around in terms of how am I going to do this or who am I going to put in charge of that. She kept our membership numbers. She kept our money. She was an easy resource in terms of the bylaws, et cetera, what we could and couldn't do. And that institutional knowledge is so valuable for me. And she's definitely going to be this. So, our
Right.
condolences go out to the family of Miss Jeffrey and to the entire community because it's a loss for all of us.
Right. Which there's certainly also because Miss Ida was her best friend, and she's another queen, queen mother of the NAACP. So we're certainly, sending our love and our wrapping our arms around Miss Ida or Queen Mother Ida as well, at this time. So yeah, so those are the announcements that I wanted to share with us before we got into the topic for today. Was there anything else, Bishop, that you wanted to share before we talked about some mental health um items?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. All right. So thank you everybody for allowing me a moment to indulge. That might happen from time to time, especially during times like this. So I've decided. Remember, I told you I was kind of working on reconfiguring some things and bringing in some segments, adding certain segments, or maybe even signature segments to the show, to the after show, and with me being a now licensed mental health counselor and therapist, and having been educated in marriage and family therapy, working, with children and families now for a number of years, have a lot of experience, but I have probably more of a passion and an interest in, and this is not to demean humanity as a whole, but I have more of an interest and a passion in building black families, black marriages, or black relationships, and certainly the black community. So mental health is always on the radar for me. And so I've decided that we have to have a mental health, time to where, we dedicate the show, the topics, the themes, the discussions and conversations around our mental health. And so, a lot of times, Bishop, we hear terms, we hear words, we hear phrases, we hear concepts, and based on how popular the term is, we also assume that we know what it means and how it's defined. You okay? Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what just happened to Bishop. But anyway, oftentimes we think that we know what it means, how the definition, how it's applied, and all of those things because we just hear the language or we just hear the term or the terminology, quite often or frequently. So mental health is certainly one of those terms, but I'm starting to find out that a lot of people don't quite know what mental health is, what it means to be aware mentally, and sometimes they mix it up with say physical health. And you can kind of, in parallels, certainly, make that distinction or make, define it in that way. But basically, mental health is a person's condition in regards to their psychological, which is your mental, right? Your mind, and emotional well being. And a lot of people will point to their heart, like their physical heart, when you say emotional well-being, but actually your emotional well-being is mental as well. you know it's not the heart versus the mind. Both are constructed in the mind. Both are constructed in the mind, and anytime there's a mishap or a malfunction, and it can be minor, it can be minor, and it can be severe. There's multiple levels, just like there are multiple transmitters. For instance, we have over a couple of million different transmitters, in our brain. So, if any little thing is off with that, in the transmission, um, then we might have some mental health issues, or we might have some issues that we need to manage or learn how to cope with, or just face or deal with, or or whatever. And everybody's regimen, or everybody's way of managing it won't be the same. Everybody needs to learn a regimen that's good for them. And that's the case with some physical health issues too, or medical health issues. Everybody can't take the same prescription in order for it to be good for them or healthy for them to promote the best or maximize on the healthiest outcome possible. But anyway, when it comes to Black mental health, I oftentimes say I don't know if everybody is familiar with the DSM. Right now it's at the DSM-5. And so it's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of statistical diagnoses that one can have or be diagnosed with, concerning their mental health, right? Or their mental well-being. And so with that being said, there might be just as many, if not, regimens that can be developed, prognosis, for instance, or like I said, regimens that can be developed to also help that individual or that person with their mental health diagnosis, or with their mental health disorders. Sometimes we call them disorders depending on what it is. So I just wanted to read you these little notes that I took, because I think it's important. And then we're going to get into a discussion. And please feel free to call in, or feel free to send me a comment so that we can talk about this. But research suggests that the adult Black community is 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems, such as major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety disorder. Additionally, Black emerging adults ages 18 to 25 also experience higher rates of mental health problems and lower rates of mental health service utilization compared to white emerging adults and older Black adults. These sobering statistics suggest that despite efforts to reduce disparities among race and class in the U.S., inequalities, and I will say inequities, are steadily increasing, most especially during this pandemic. Okay, so in other words, I'm basically trying to say, just like with everything else, just like with this pandemic, it's impacting us the most, and in our mental health, it's impacting us the most. So our mental health disparity again is increasing, and we're dealing with a lot more depression than other communities. We're dealing with a lot more anxiety than other communities, and those are just two very popular mental health disorders, or whatever. On average, everybody just about deals with some level of depression or some level of anxiety. But if you're Black in America, you're dealing with it probably 10 times more than your white counterpart. Okay? So just remember that. Some of the reasons, right, that they started to do some research some time ago, and this was pre-pandemic. It was certainly pre-pandemic. It might have been a couple of decades before the pandemic started. Some of the reasons for such a drastic increase are lack of trust. We're talking about that even with the vaccine, right? In the medical system, due to historical abuses of Black people in the guise of health care, less access to adequate insurance, culturally responsive mental health providers. In other words, there's not enough mental health providers that look like me to service you, you know. And then we also have financial burdens more than other groups and past history with discrimination in the mental health system. Also, a fear that these experiences will be repeated is also suggested by research as factors in explaining lower utilization. In other words, people like our people, us, we're not seeking, or either we're not seeking mental health services, or we don't believe in mental health services. And I think we need to, talk a little bit more about that. I hope we can have a little discussion about that before the show is over today. Um, yeah. So how important is mental health even to your physical health? How important is mental health even to your physical health? And by the way, I will be in the future, and I'm talking about the near future, because right now I'm putting together some programs to bring some forums to the platforms about this, the vaccine, and the virus, and where it is, in the Black community, and what we should be doing, and how, we can protect ourselves and continue to be safe. But I'm also planning on bringing on some of my friends in the near future, some people that I admire that are in mental health counseling, that work with Black folks, or whatever, and know how to treat us and handle us in the areas of mental health as well. So I plan on bringing those people on, having panel discussions so that we can be more empowered and informed about our mental health. But for the most part, I'm going to stay away from the medication because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist. I am just a master's leveled mental health counselor. So I don't write prescriptions for medication. So all I do is diagnose mentally, psychologically. I also, have some background in sociology as well. So I tie the two in together oftentimes. But nevertheless, we create more of a clinical treatment that doesn't include medication. From my perspective, it includes regimens, it includes coping skills, it includes management, it includes organization, it includes organizational skills, I should say. It just includes a number of psychological, more intellectual, more social kinds of skills and behaviors, to help us learn how to cope, how to deal with, how to manage our mental health disorders. So, what is mental health? What is mental health, and how important is it to our physical health? How important is it to your happiness? It's dire. And listen, I'm a woman of faith. I think this is really important to talk about. I'm a woman of faith. I see you, Juanita. I was not sure however I did. All right. I'm a woman of faith. And oftentimes, you will hear people say, that God is you get your spirit right and your mental will be right. Well, what is the spirit? What is the spirit? Guess what? The mind and the spirit makes the soul. Makes the soul. It is your soul that is eternal, right? That's what we believe. That's what we've been taught. That is what we know to be true. It is your soul that makes the spirit. Why would the Bible even take the time to say, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, if your mental was not significant to your soul? It is your mind. It's your mind and your spirit that makes the soul. that makes the soul. It's your mind and your spirit that makes the soul. This body, this shell, does what the mind and the spirit tells it to do. Tells it to do. But we have to take care of all three. We have to take care of all three. We have to nurture our spirit and we have to nurture our mind. But guess what? We got to be just as vigilant about nurturing and caring for and looking out and trying to, make this mind as well as we do our bodies. I see a lot of people. I just gotta tell you the contradiction. Okay, I'm not gonna call no names because I don't want to do that. But I don't bite my tongue about it. When I'm in these people's face, whatever. And these are family members too. So, but anyway, I got people in my life that they eat well. They eat. They say I'm eating. I'm leading a clean life. So I eat like this. I eat plant-based foods. I drink water. Or whatever. I don't put sugar in my food. Great. I don't put salt in my food. Great. I'm all down for it. I don't eat meat. Great. But you at the bar and you drink, a bottle of Hennessy and you smoking 20 joints a day. I just feel like that's a contradiction.
Bottle of Hennessy and 20.
A bottle of Hennessy and you smoking 20 joints a day. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but
20.
they drinking the brown liquor and they smoking the weed and they smoking the cigarettes and but they working out for an hour every day. They going to the gym and they eating like this, but you can't put the cigarettes away. You can't put the joint away. You can't, I'm sorry. That's just a contradiction. That's not clean living. So I mean,
Listen, dead off 20 joints, boy. They're gonna be. I said they're gonna be dead off 20 joints in one day.
Anyway, but but y'all get my point. And so what I'm saying is, when we are promoting, a healthier mind, if you're aiming for a healthier mindset, you gotta go all the way. You can't be in between here. But nevertheless, we gotta learn how to manage things, and we gotta learn how to not contradict ourselves in the way that we manage our health, our well-being, whether that be mental, whether that be physical, or whether that be certainly spiritual. And I think we get it much quicker when we're thinking about the physical. I think we get it much quicker how important it is to be consistent, how important it is to be true to whatever you're aiming for. Now, if you're not aiming for it, if you're not aiming for a healthier mind, then you're not aiming for a healthier mind. And I'm not saying that we won't all kind of get off track, but I'm just saying that taking care of our minds is just as important as taking care of this body, and certainly, taking care of our spirit. All right. So we just got to be consistent in all of that. So however you're taking care of your spirit, if you really push it and taking care of your spirit, for instance, living a holy life, just use that same concept, that same discipline to take care of your mind. The same thing with your body or with our bodies. And, and I know I'm not 100%, but I can tell you this. I'm getting a lot better. Because my self-care regimen, has certainly increased. By the way, let me just mention that some of you have started to follow me when I said that I took the whole month of December, as a reset month. And I kind of, I didn't fully do everything that I wanted to do. I literally wanted to take a day every day and sometime every day to focus on, a thing, a way of a behavior that I wanted to improve, enhance, certainly again for my mental health. And I probably did it about 50%. In other words, I probably did about 15, 16 days of it and not the full 30 days. So I'm a little upset about that part, but I'm also going to celebrate the fact that I did something that I never did before. I took the time for myself and I didn't feel guilty about it. I didn't feel guilty about taking time for myself. Taking resources for myself, telling my family, no, I'm not doing that today. I'm not doing this today. I'm resting, I'm relaxing, or I'm going here, I'm going there. And I was fine with it. I was fine with it. And like I said, I didn't feel guilty in saying no. I didn't feel guilty in saying no, because no is a complete sentence, and I didn't feel guilty about making some meetings or not going some places, this, that, and the other. That was time that I needed for myself. That was also time that I took for myself to kind of restructure and reorganize my life. I think a lot of times, what we don't do, especially us women, I don't know if men have this problem like we do, but I think what we don't do a good job of is organizing the plate. Like it's good to the stuff that we do is good. The stuff that we do is right. But sometimes it just needs to be organized. We can't be all places at one time, or whatever. So it just doesn't make sense to say, okay, I do that, I'll be there, I do this, I give that, this, that. You can't be all places at one time, or whatever case may be. So we just gotta, kind of manage those times a little bit better. But nevertheless, so my question again today is, how important is your mental health to your happiness? What about that? To your happiness, to your happiness. A lot of times I hear people, oh, let me say this about happiness. This just came to me. So I hear people, especially married folk, if they're not happy, they blame their spouse. And I don't believe that it's a spouse's responsibility to make you happy. I don't believe that. Now, I also don't believe that, well, if you're in a situation where your spouse makes you sad, then that's something that you need to check. But I don't think that it's a responsibility of a spouse to make you happy. I think what is important is that you are happy, because you're doing what you need to do to bring happiness into your life, right? But like I said, if that spouse or if you're in a kind of relationship where you're being drained, or whatever, then that needs to be checked. That needs to be checked. But it's not a person's responsibility to make you happy. Happy comes from you and how you conduct yourself and how you behave. And like I said, how we take care of our own mental health, how we love ourselves, how we see ourselves. That is what creates the endorphins, if you will, to make us feel happy, because happiness is a feeling. And again, that comes from how we're making ourselves feel, how we're moving in the world, and how that makes us feel, or whatever. Now, again, as Black people, we already got all of this external stuff we got to deal with all the time, right? So how are we going to maneuver around in this world that's so hectic and so much against us, in its racist behaviors, and me as a woman and its sexist behaviors, and all of that other kind of stuff, discriminatory, whatever. or whatever case. How are we gonna maneuver around the world and still find our happy? And I mean, that's possible. We know that's possible, right? If our ancestors could still find they happy in some of the stuff that they had to deal with on a daily basis, they could still find. Now, there's a difference between happiness and joy. I don't know why I'm going into that, but there's a difference between happiness and joy. Joy, I believe, comes from the spirit. That's from your spirit being nurtured. That's from you, filling up your, getting what you need and nurturing and meditating and doing whatever it is that you need to do to nurture your spirit. Joy comes from the spirit. And I say this because I've experienced it. You can be sad, you can be hurt, you can be crying because you're sad, but still have joy. Happiness is different from joy. Happiness is, like, I'm happy right now. I'm having a good time. I'm laughing. I'm smiling. I just feel good. It's just a good feeling. It's temporary, but joy is eternal. Joy is eternal. So that's the difference there with that. So that mental though, nurturing that mental, or whatever case may be, can give you more of those moments of happiness, can give you more, and nurturing your mental with your spirit, you know I mean, the joy is just really exacerbated then, when you can create more of those moments of happiness, certainly in your life, so your mental, here's my answer to my own question. Your mental, right? Your mental health is critical to your happiness. Your mental health, how you feel about yourself, when you see yourself in the mirror, or whatever, just how you feel about yourself, period. That is critical to your happiness. I remember one time, I'm gonna share something. I'm gonna be very transparent right now because I know Bishop got a meeting to go to, so the show is almost over. Oh, I wish I could interact with y'all more. But nevertheless, I remember one time, and I'm gonna say it was probably um my dark season. I think y'all here remember me referring to my time of Great Depression, my dark season. So I was in my dark season. Of course, my mom wasn't here, thank God. My mom lives in Texas, or lived in Texas, and so I was calling her on a regular basis, and but she knew something was wrong. She knew something was wrong, and she knew something was wrong for a while. And so she finally figured it out. And my mom said this to me. She didn't physically see me. She was on the phone with me. And this was before FaceTime and cell phones and, and all of this stuff that we have now. But nevertheless, we was on the phone together. I never would forget this. My mom said to me, and I was kind of curled up in the bed, hadn't done nothing to myself. My hair was raggedy, just nothing, So I was in a state of depression, and my mom said, "Look, you gotta get up and you gotta do something with yourself, because when you do something with yourself to look better, you feel better." Now that sounds so simple, but she was so right. It sounded so simple, but she was also so right. So, but what was hard though, because when you in depression like that, which I didn't know it until I came out of it. What was hard though was the getting up, and going and getting my hair done, going, get my nails done, put my makeup on, put my jewelry on, put my little outfit on, dressed up, made plans to go and meet my girls and, just fellowship and socialize. and this, that, and the other. But when I did it and I went out with them, or whatever, it was oppressing. But when I got to my girls and we started talking and laughing and da 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 da, I did feel better. And then, the next day I did it again. And then, and before I knew it, I was out of the depression. Depression is hard, baby. I know. I know, sweetheart. I know. I was there. I was there. I know. I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. But it is something to just getting up, doing something to yourself, feeling good about your presentation and feeling good about what you did for yourself. That's what it was for me. And then my mother said to me, she said, just make up in your mind from now on, and this is how she said it. And I think this might help somebody. But this is how she said it to me. And I knew exactly what she meant when she said it. She said, just make up in your mind, baby. From now on, every time you get up, you're going to appreciate God for the gift. And you're going to put your A game on. And you're going to take on the day. And you're not going to let the day take you. When she said that to me, I felt like I was literally delivered. I felt like I was literally delivered because it was just something about understanding that today is a gift. It's a present. The fact that I'm here, I made it, I survived. I get that whatever it was that I went through, that was hurtful, it was painful, it made me sad, it made me mad, it made me angry, it disappointed me, all of that stuff. I faced it, I felt it, but I lived out of it. I survived it. And now I can thrive beyond it. Now that I made it through it, now I can thrive. Now I can thrive and become a better, an even better person, an even more compassionate person, an even more merciful person, a person with more grace and with more mercy. But I absolutely get it. I absolutely get those dark times because I'm one that's been there. I know what depression is. And like I said, I know how depression can sneak up on you. You can be in it and not know it until you come out of it. Until you come out of it. But like I said, my mother said to me, and I'm going to say it to somebody today, and I'm just going to end the show like that. Take today as a gift. And when you get that gift, make up in your mind that you're going to put your A game on, which is the unwrapping of the gift. You're going to put your A game on, and you're going to go and take the day, and you're not going to let the day take you. So this is my first installment of my Mental Health Monday. Hopefully the next time that we talk about mental health, I'll be a little bit more prepared, and maybe I can figure out a way for us to be a little bit more interactive. But I hope that today was a blessing in some kind of way. Thank you, Whit, for sharing. Sweetheart, we love you. Mac been there. I know it. I get it. I understand it. And but you're much better for it. Having been through it, you're much better for it.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure being with you all in the Justice and Flow Hour. And Happy New Year to each and every one of you. I hope your 2022 is everything that you dream for it to be. I saw somebody post a meme yesterday that said, oops, I messed up already. I guess 2023 is going to be my year. So listen, even if you messed up, you can still bounce back and make this the best year ever. All right. Same time, same bat station on next week. We want to be right back with you right after the spoken word with Justice and Flow on next Monday at 10 o'clock a.m. Always a pleasure, and we'll see y'all later. Y'all be good.
Bye, Mother Green. Bye, Whitney. Bye, Juanita.
Juanita, I was not choking. Thanks for your concern. My
Bye, Angela.
my ring light was falling, and I was trying to catch it before it fell. My man cave was being renovated, so everything's not like it normally is. Anyway, we're out. Till the next time we talk to you and you talk to us. Always remember, God loves you. So do we. Deuces.